I said that I may be committing sacrilege with this, and sacrilege it was. I guess Electro & Co. really didn't want you to know about this. Too late though, the oath has been fulfilled. Now the RTR Lite here has a much more powerful controller. Now, to make it more powerful than a regular RTR altogether. And I think we could almost get that with just the Fardriver that we recently installed in this. Definitely we'll be able to outperform any stock RTR Lite though. All we really need are some adjustments to the controller settings, and then we can put this bike to the test. First though, some much needed cleanup on the install and the wiring. It's a snug fit, which is great. It's almost like the frame was made for it. Kinda. But before all that, I just had a zip tie on each corner to keep it in place. Since then, I found some 3/4 inch cable clamps at Home Depot to better set it in the frame and secured it in place with more zip ties. I was hoping that I would be able to put a through bolt through all of that, the heatsink plus the clamp, but it's so tight of a fit that I really can't get anything in there other than a zip tie. So I'm just gonna have to stick with the zip ties, but at least it looks a little bit cleaner. The wiring was also thrown in previously and just an absolute mess. Everything was just barely connected enough to the point where I knew everything would work and shoved around enough so that I could actually get the battery to fit. But now that we have everything verified, we can pull it out, clean it up, tape it up, and that way we can have a wiring harness that doesn't resemble rainbow spaghetti. Before I go throwing this harness back into the bike, now that it's completed, let me show you all these connections so you know exactly what goes where when connecting things up to an RTR. So based on where everything sits, I've actually spliced out the hall sensor wires here so it comes out directly and goes the opposite direction. Everything else needs to go up top. This needs to go down below. And for these connections, it is pretty straightforward because there's 6 wires, 6 unique colors, and they're all color coded to be the exact same as the hall sensor wires that are coming out of the motor. There's no specific order to this because this does not connect to the exact same connection that was on the bike previously, but I have it as black, red, green, yellow, blue, white. Next thing I'll point out, which you shouldn't have to deal with, is the Bluetooth connection, although I'm pointing it out because you can see that mine has a new connection on it, and that's just because when I took this out, I must have pulled on it a little too hard because one of the wires were completely exposed and I didn't have the same kind of blade style connections that this came with. Now I'm going to move on to this 6-pin because this goes to the 3-speed and the throttle combination on the Electro & Co kit, and this one from the Fardriver end comes with 2 distinct sections. And this is split out in a weird way because that's honestly just how things connect up to the Electro & Co 3-speed throttle combo. So on either side are the throttle connections. So there's this little bundle right here. We have a green on one end and then a red black on the other, and those correspond exactly to the same colors on the Electro & Co side: red, black, and green. Then in between those we have 3 wires that go to the 3-speed on the Fardriver end. There is a blue, white, black in the middle, and yellow on the end. This might be a little confusing because on the Electro & Co side, that one has a blue, yellow, and a brown wire, but they don't line up exactly how you'd expect on the Fardriver side. From the Fardriver side, blue and white goes to blue, black goes to yellow, and yellow goes to brown. Then real quickly, this is the key power. There's only one wire going to this, which is orange. That's the switched power on the Fardriver side. And I have the other side, which is the red, the positive. This actually plugs in directly to the battery terminal. It doesn't go through this wiring harness, which is why it's disconnected here because that one's tied up on the bike currently. But this lines up to the key switch on the Electro & Co, which is just red and black, and it doesn't really matter which one you go with because it's just kind of a disconnection connection thing. Now finally, we have the display, which is only 3 wires, and this one I actually do have to show you in more detail because there's a correction here. So we have 3 distinct colors here, and none of them are going to be the same as the Electro & Co kit. So we're going to start on this side. This is orange, which is our switched power, same as the key, and that goes to red on the display. Then in the middle we have black, which is also the ground, and that's going to go to the middle green one on the display. Then we come to this one, which is probably the most important because this one is where your speedometer comes into play. And previously I had shown you that this one was light blue. That's because the Fardriver wiring diagram shows light blue as analog speed line in, but this depends on which Fardriver controller you're using. So in the Fardriver wiring diagram, not only is there the light blue for speed, but there's also a purple one for analog speed. So it could depend on which one of those 2 you use. However, there's a third option, which you can see here, a brown wire, because with my specific controller, which is a 72450, this one actually uses the boost wire, which is a dark brown. And I'm not exactly sure why that is, but it's my general understanding that if you have an ND72450 or smaller, it is going to be that light blue or purple wire that I showed you on the wiring diagram, most likely light blue, but in my case, having a bigger one, a 450, it's going to be the dark brown boost wire. At least now that it's corrected, I should see some actual mile/per-hour readings on the display here rather than those big fat double zeros that I was seeing when I rode this the first time. And while I'm at it, I also want to redo the entire control setup and the auto learn process on this entirely because this controller was in a bike previously and there are some settings settings in the controller for that, and I want to start off fresh. And yes, I even removed the chain, so there's absolutely no load on the bike, because anytime I do, I get comments telling me that I'm doing it wrong. I also topped up the battery, so it's 100% full, and in the parameters, I set the pull pairs to 5, Electro & Co verified that for me, the rated voltage to 60, and I played around with the temp sensor enough to where I think it's the KTY 83122. I did this with the bike having sat for a while and checked the graph until the motor temp and the controller temp were basically the same.
And that's all it takes to get you going as fast as possible. Let's see what that number is. Here we go, 54 already, 66, 71, 76, 78, 80, 90, 101! Just kidding, obviously. Even though we got that line-in wire fixed so that we're actually seeing a speedo, it's not accurate, of course, and I think that's because the speed pulse in the Fardriver app, the default is set way too high, so I'm going to turn that down and then just do some trial and error at that point, run it, see how it compares to the GPS, make any adjustments, and we can dial it in from there. That looks really accurate right there. Well, it looks like the special numbers for this particular bike was speed pulse set at 4 and speed pulse number set at 37,500, and this is pretty damn accurate. So now let's actually see how this thing runs, and I will say up front that this is still on a very, very safe tune. So this is currently set at 50 line amps and 150 phase amps, which is the exact same that I have in the Mototech. So let's first see what it does in this scenario. All right, we're at 34, 35, 36, and hitting uphill. So that only showed up to 36 miles an hour, and granted, I was going uphill at the time, so it's probably a little bit more than that, but maybe like just 1 or 2 miles an hour higher than that. But that's basically the exact same top speed that I'm getting out of the 60-volt Mototech, which that makes sense really because it's both 60 volts and they're both at 50 amps.
However, I happen to know that the stock RTR Lite battery is capable of up to 80 amps continuous, and funny enough, that's actually the continuous amperage of the regular RTR's controller. This picture is taken straight from Electro & Co.'s website, and plain as day, 80 amps current. And I know you might see that and think to yourself, well, I went to the website and I saw that the regular RTR is 8 kilowatts, and if I apply the formula of 72 volts times 80 amps, I'm only getting 5.7 kilowatts. What gives? Well, this is a prime example of the difference between rated power and nominal power. While the website boasts 8 kilowatts, it's showing that as maximum power output, which can only be seen in a few short bursts. Nominal power, on the other hand, is what you would be running continuously. Even so, we're still on the stock 60-volt battery in this case. So right now I'm only pulling about 4.8 kilowatts nominal. However, the stock RTR Lite has 5 kilowatts maximum output, which I'm pretty damn near close to, and what I presume to be about 3 kilowatts nominal. So for only about 170 bucks in the cost of this controller, I was able to increase the power by a whopping 60%.
Now let's see what that extra 60% gets us. Whoa! Holy acceleration! This is a lot faster. Woo! Oh, that had room to grow, and that was only 45. I saw 47 there. That acceleration is something. Look how punchy this is. 0 to 25 like that. Look at this fast turn in. Yes! Wow! It is so responsive now. You can just gun it out of the corners and it just shoots you forward. I'm gonna have to set up a proper course for this thing to really see what it's got. I don't even care at this point that I can't get up to the top speed. There might be some fine tuning that I can do to the ratios and speed maybe, so that it gets to that top speed a little faster, but I think I have it at a safe point right now. I have a lot of field weakening on it, so I think that the throttle curve, it kind of goes on really hard at quarter to half throttle, and then after that it starts to taper off a little bit. But you know what? Even as it is, even if I can't get past 47 miles an hour, with that acceleration, who cares? If you're just running around in a parking lot like this and just doing little fun stuff, it is just absolutely a blast. Oh, so much so that I might need better brakes. I need to make an even bigger rotor for the front. An actual big brake kit. All right, let's do a proper top speed run on the street here outside of the limits of a parking lot. See if we get anything higher than what we saw previously. 47 is what we saw in the parking lot, so will we get any higher? 48, I saw 48. 49. Ah, shoot, and we're going uphill. So off camera, I ran that a few times to get an average or to see if I could get anything higher, but 49 was the absolute highest that I saw throughout all of that.
But make no mistake, this is still a smashing success, although I know that a regular RTR could easily walk past this going 49 miles an hour, and if I was any better at tuning, I could probably get some more top speed out of it, and if I was any lighter, I could probably go just as fast on a stock RTR Lite. But kilowatt for kilowatt, this is pulling much more than the stock controller could ever handle. So we are one step of the way there. We now have what I believe to be the most powerful RTR Lite in the hands of the buying public. Well, this is future me, post October 18th me. I really gotta stop scheduling these things so far out in advance. Since September, Electro & Co has released the TruMoto 6+7 kit, so it's possible that someone has taken that and put it in an RTR Lite. So at least we had the most powerful RTR Lite. Although, spoiler, this bike is so much more powerful now. Really quickly though, we do need to update the cost of the total build on this bike. There wasn't that much money spent in this because it was mostly just fine tuning and testing everything, but I did spend a whopping $2.20 for those cable clamps at Home Depot. I know it's not that much, but we're counting everything. I also upgraded the chain as I was doing this because this bike is early enough that it didn't come stock with a thick chain. I believe they all do now. So I was able to find a heavy duty chain on Amazon for 16 bucks and change, and I'm really glad that I did this because when I pulled off the stock chain and I lined it up against the new one with the same number of links, you can clearly see that the stock chain has been stretched out, and by a lot, and there's barely any miles on this. So the new total that we've spent is $369.21, and for having the most powerful RTR Lite, I'd say that's pretty good. But we'll be spending a lot more in the very next video with this bike. Bet you know what that is. So my apologies again to Electro & Co. You built a hell of a platform though. I really love this bike and I just wanted to modify it myself. And I guess I'm just gonna have to live with the fact that my sponsorship inquiry is gonna remain unread. But Electro & Crew, if you're watching this and you wanna send me that new mod kit to test out, I would be more than happy to slap it in this bike and give it a rip because, make no mistake, I can be bought. But anyway, now to make this bike even more powerful, we're definitely gonna outperform that RTR.
Sorry, not sorry. Electro and Co. I can make this thing perform for so much less dough. That said, I'd still love to be sponsored, so if you could give it some more